HR is not at the table when financials are shared. So there's something that we don't know that we need to know in order to provide, the right information. So, either ask, exposure to that information or a little bit about it and just say, I need this in order to give you what you need that's going to make you successful. What do you feel comfortable sharing? And, how much can I use of that to share the information?
Do you find it hard to justify budget for HR initiatives? Or maybe you find that you have the budget you need, but it becomes difficult to show the ROI to your CEO, CFO, or COO. Today, we're going to be discussing just that and showcasing the ROI of HR initiatives. I am joined with Linda Schiaffino. Linda is the CEO and founder of Coach Business Solutions. Without further ado, let's get right into it. In terms of showcasing ROI of HR initiatives, we kind of touched on this, right? But really quick, I actually want to backtrack a little bit. What is the difference between metrics and KPI, first and foremost?
So KPIs are key performance indicators, and they try to focus on key strategy goals of the company. So that becomes important, and it becomes crucial to have that background. What are the strategy goals of the company? Hopefully they've shared them so that everyone's on board. Everybody's pulling in the right direction, but the KPIs will measure the performance against those key strategy goals, whereas metrics measure the performance for specific operational business activities. The line does tend to blur. You'll hear a lot of people say KPIs when they're talking about metrics. In my opinion, yes, you could really, dissect it down to what the specific definitions are, but it's all in the analysis and what is relevant to people so that they get the information they need to make the right decisions. And again, you always want to be working with those, those other leaders, CFO and COO, what's important to them, whether you call it a KPI or not, or a metric. They want those numbers. They want those results. Most of our ERPs are now really pulling in just some dictated dashboard KPIs that are live. And then I know NetSuite is one of them. You establish the KPI and you're seeing it every day. It's not waiting for a month-end report or a quarter-end report. You're seeing it every day. And they do bridge all sorts of aspects, whether it's financial, HR, or operational. So there is a lot of emphasis that should be placed on the tools that you set up and customize in order to make your lives easier.
Most definitely. I think it's really interesting to kind of look at KPIs as the goals that almost are speaking to the entire company, no matter what team, what department. It is something that encompasses the whole organization, theoretically. And I think when we're talking about presenting our metrics, our HR metrics, our HR data to others in the organization, to leadership, it's really important to actually connect it to those KPIs, right? And I think that really gets in CEO, CFO, COO's ears in terms of they're able to relate to that, right? So I think that is such a great point. Looking at this next slide here, if I can pull it up, there we go. This is from an awesome article on LinkedIn, and it's talking about determining your KPIs and actually building those out. I think, again, this first one has a really good point in identifying those business goals. The second point is identify what the department needs to achieve in order to support the business goals. Again, this goes back to exactly what I was just saying. When we're talking about presenting our HR data and metrics, linking it back to those overall business objectives. And number 3, establish the performance goals. Linda, my question for you is, what are the KPIs that HR should actually track to measure the success of their programs?
I think turnover rate is important. Absentee rate is important, especially for shift and hourly workers. Can they identify a specific shift or department that is suffering, and what to do about that and how to fix that? Typically, the night shift workers are a special breed. That's a group of people that would really need some good attention to make sure that they're happy, they're safe, and that they will stay. Because in those industries, you do have a bigger challenge in hiring for those areas. Employee satisfaction could be a little slippery to try and analyze, but those employee surveys are important. You always want to make sure they're anonymous, because I've had too many examples of companies that they say they're anonymous, but there's always a way. If you pay a little extra, you can actually get the detail. And in some departments, if there are only one or two people, you could pretty much identify who those people are. So they're going to be a lot more reticent in being honest. And it really is key that you get some honest feedback from the employees. There's, any number of, salary benchmarks against industry and against the needs of, the company to be profitable that are important. I think you'd start with those, and then you develop a program after that, because once you present those to the leadership, the C-suite, they're likely to have some questions to say, well, what about this? What about that? Mm-hmm. And as most of these things are just related to numbers, it's just simple algebra where you can just calculate it and give them some information to say, this is our percentage. Analyze it against some benchmarks, some industry benchmarks that you're able to find, and say, we stand at 50% of our industry or 90% of our industry. That then translates into some really good employee PR where you could share that information. The surveys also provide that information. And we all know of all these localities that are running top workplace awards. There are some KPIs that are required in order for those companies to be considered for that. That's a badge of honor for these companies, and the KPIs support the application of that.
I love the aspect of kind of working backwards from, instead of saying, all right, we got these programs in place, let's measure the KPIs, and then going from there, instead actually maybe looking at your KPIs, looking at your metrics, and then evaluating what programs might need or might not need, whatever, change is necessary there. So we had a webinar on how to design a retention strategy for hourly staff. And we had on a really great guest. Her name's Margaret Jackson. And she talked a lot about, not necessarily working harder, but smarter, right? And doing exactly that and making sure, hey, are we hitting the mark? If not, what can we do to improve? And she says she constantly is updating her retention strategy every month maybe. And it is, I think that's so smart, because again, it's so important that we're constantly reevaluating and making sure that we're consistently hitting the mark on whatever the program's goal is at the end of the day.
And the employees see that right away. If they see that there is a targeted approach to retaining, the current work staff, there's a trickle down effect that is almost immeasurable, except that you could measure it by, retention. But it brings the team together, and we really need that in order to just, be stable and profitable.
And I think for those who the program's impacting, those who are actually on the front lines, who are, running the store floor or whatever it might be, they're feeling those changes that you're making. I would like to think it really does keep things from kind of going a little bit stale in terms of, all right, day in, day out. Instead, hey, there's some changes, there's some ebbs and flows to whatever the program might be in this case. There's always something to kind of be cognizant of. And I think that keeps frontline staff on their toes in a great way, in a very good way. In terms of evaluating, multiple HR initiatives or programs that we've got, what are the best ways to compare their ROI and actually prioritize them accordingly, especially if they have different timeframes or even objectives at the end of the day?
That could be tricky. And again, the communication is key here, because there may be timing differences that you may not be aware of. The CFO has, actually, quarterly reporting, et cetera, monthly reporting. The COO might have, some operational reporting that is off cycle. So understanding what their needs are without, really doubling your workload. We want to try and make sure the HR professionals are taken care of and paid attention to as well. But I think you never go wrong by aligning with the corporate and leadership objectives. Most companies are issuing their mission statements, their vision statements. Maybe have a chat with those that have created those statements, and get a little bit of what does that mean to the rank and file, because it may be over their heads. Maybe that those mission and vision statements are speaking to external parties and not so much internal. So understanding what are their intentions with issuing these statements, and do they really live them on a daily basis, because people will see that if they don't. Prioritize accordingly to that, and then organize the data collection so that, the reporting is short cycled. Again, we don't want to belabor these things. If someone's asking for some data, we don't want to give them 3 months ago. And we also don't want to take that long in order to get that to them. So there might be there's a lot of teamwork that has to go on with, the accounting team. And a lot of times, HR is not at the table when financials are shared. So there's something that we don't know that we need to know in order to provide, the right information. So, either ask, exposure to that information or a little bit about it and just say, I need this in order to give you what you need that's going to make you successful. What do you feel comfortable sharing? And, how much can I use of that to share the information?
In terms of timelines, is there a timeline that maybe HR should match or kind of latch onto to maybe get their point across better or, get some more data out of? Is there anything like that you would recommend?
I think it's, particular to the company and the industry. For public corporations, it's, 3 days after month end. But they need to be putting the tools and support in place to be able to capture that information quickly. There's, whether it's quarterly, again, understanding the needs of the C-suite. How often do they need to present this information? How much time do they need to digest it and own it and really appreciate the value of it? And, what are their timelines? We work on, in HR, we work on, a payroll cycle, right? So we have information. And then, of course, there's a year-end cycle, W-2s, et cetera. There are deadlines for when this information has to be in and complete and accurate without, additional costs for, corrections. So those cycles are a little bit broader and they're really set. Everyone knows when payday is. Everyone knows what the pay cycle is. So they understand their cycles, their needs, and work accordingly with them. And I have to encourage, don't be afraid to ask questions. I think it's never a lost art to say, I don't know the answer to this question, but I want to learn because I want to be able to give you what you need. I've never had somebody, say that to me where I was dismissive or thought less of them. I would lean into it because it showed an interest and it showed a great bridge to a partnership with that team.
I love that. I think, again, talking about communication, it goes the same for HR, right? We really need to make sure that we're communicating, we're asking those questions, and we're getting the data that, quite frankly, we don't get all the time, but we deserve very much so. So I love that. I think that's awesome. In terms of continuously assessing, we kind of talked a little bit about the previous webinar on, Margaret Jackson. She is constantly reassessing her retention program in terms of assessing and improving the ROI of HR initiatives. How often do you recommend that? And, how can actually they ensure that they're doing that as a team within leadership even?
I think that, being proactive and preemptive is always going to be key. Again, understanding the needs of, your constituents, but also if you're seeing a trend that is concerning or positive, if things are going really well, maybe more than you had even anticipated, jump on that cycle because, nobody loves bad news, but they don't want to be surprised. And if there's good news, we always want to hear it as soon as we can. So, being preemptive and ready will always poise HR professionals very well.
Absolutely. To close out, I would love to hear 1 or 2 top tips, actions, or takeaways that our audience can leave with to better build their case with HR data. I know I've said this a lot. Direct communication with leadership is absolutely key. So, hopefully we have that opportunity. Hopefully they're open to it, the people on the other side of the table, to understanding that giving a little will get a lot for them. The numbers, may not be available to them, or maybe they don't understand them, but understanding, what is the relevant data and then providing it timely and accurate. Those are 2 words that financial leaders are always looking for, verifiable. And then you want to organize your thoughts on that relevant data. You want to research and you want to practice till perfect. And bringing that other team member on board, like, what do they think of this? This is what I came up with. Does it ring true for you? Does it provide any information that is relevant to you?
And if not, what can I do to tweak it? Because it's your relationship building. And in doing that, you're doing a world of good for the respect of the HR department, because it stops becoming the principal's office. It stops becoming just the payroll desk, and it really does lean into that human aspect. And we can't run companies without humans, not yet. So we need to make sure that we're protecting all of us.